So, first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. DZ Tribe, Josh Thomas, if you haven't already, check out thedozone.com for productivity tips, accountability, and overall just a great bunch of amazing human beings looking to get more stuff done. Once again, that's thedozone.com. Our guest today, I think you're really going to like. His name is Brian Wright, and he is one of the most interesting people that I have ever met. He is the founder of Success Profiles Radio, and he's also a writing coach, a ghostwriter, radio show host, and a magazine publisher who helps people share their message with the world and monetize their expertise. Brian, I want you to say hello to the tribe here and tell me one thing that you believe is the key to getting stuff done that most people wouldn't think of.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Hello to everybody watching and listening. I appreciate it. I would say the thing that helps me get the most done is to pretend that tomorrow is my vacation day and I have to get everything done before I leave. Because you give yourself a real sense of urgency when you do that. If you don't have a deadline, if you don't have a sense of urgency, you're just going to meander through your day, and whatever you decide to get done is what you get done, and whatever to everything else. But if you give yourself that deadline, I must, not I should get something done today, I must get all of these things done today before I go on my trip. Those are my most productive days ever.
And so do you actually, whenever you have a really productive day, do you actually go and take a vacation day afterwards?
It's interesting. I give myself a little latitude. I'll give myself maybe a couple hours of me time the next day just to reward myself. But I always still have my list of things that I want to do. I try to get at least one thing done every day to move me forward toward any of my goals. So I have a list of the things that I need to get done, even if it's just edit an article, even if it's just to do all of my posting on social media. But I want to get something done every single day in the progress of at least one of my goals. And I feel like I've had a productive day if I do that. If I get a lot more than one of those things done, then that's awesome. But you have to do the work every single day.
Yeah, you're right about that, man. And so speaking of doing the work every single day, I know that that kind of creates some compound returns and compound interest over time. Mm-hmm. And take us back, way back. There was a moment where you weren't quite where you wanted to be, and things were not going so well. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Before I was in business full time for myself, I was working in some call centers and wasn't making a lot of money, but I had bought a home where I was making a lot more money at that time. And then my income level changed, and I reached a point where I was no longer able to afford my home. I was not ready to give it up. I started asking myself, how can I make this work? How can I make this work? How can I buy myself some more time? Well, I had heard of Airbnb by this time. And I thought, what would that look like if I rented my home out as an Airbnb? Arizona is a destination place in the wintertime, especially. And I figured I could rent my home for more on a short-term basis than I could having a longer-term tenant. And so I put my home on Airbnb, and I did successfully rent my home out for an entire winter. So now my question was, where do I stay? Do I pay someone to rent their room? Someone I don't know, someone where I don't know what level of privacy I may or may not have? Or do I sleep in my car? And that's what I did, because for me, the choice was, do I pay someone to rent the room, or do I continue paying to do my radio show? I chose to continue funding my dream. That was important to me. I am where I am right now, 10 years of Success Profiles Radio, because I kept it going. I had to take a hiatus only twice in those 10 years. Once when I had a life-threatening illness and I was in the hospital and I paused my show for 3 months. That was hard. The second time when I paused my show last year for 6 weeks because my dad passed away and I was helping my mom settle his affairs and plan his service. So I had to pause twice. But otherwise, I've been very consistent. I've kept my show going for 10 years solid. and it has led to a lot of things. So the choices you make do have ramifications, whether for good or for bad. But I decided that in order to keep my dream alive and in order to keep my home for a while longer, I had to rent my place out as an Airbnb.
And sleep
And
in your
that's what I
car.
did.
I always admire somebody. It's not like there's, I mean, I guess there are a lot of people that have had to sleep in their car in their life, but but when you had to make that choice to, this is where I'm going to live for a period of time,
Mhm.
I always respect that, because I think, I'm not like a super tall guy, but I can
Mhm.
never really fully stretch out in a car. It drives me
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. And I didn't have an office or anything, and I wasn't in my business full time. And in fact, in order to get online, I was beholden to when the public library was open.
Mm.
That's
And
kind of hard. And I had a desktop computer. I didn't have my laptop then, so I couldn't carry around my desktop computer very easily. I kept it in storage. And if I did decide to stay in a Motel 6 for a night just so that I could have a legitimate place to sleep and take a shower and shave, I would bring my desktop computer out of storage with me for a night. But gosh, it was such a pain in the butt to set it up and tear it down. So I didn't do that very often, but it was nice when I was able to do that. But yeah, I was able to prepare my show, and I was looking for work and trying to figure out what my next steps were going to be. It's interesting because one of the branches of the Chandler Public Library was attached to a high school. So there were a couple of times where they had a fire drill in the middle of the day. So we had to leave the library and step outside. So that was an interruption in my day. But when you have to do the things you have to do, then you have to do it. In fact, I kept my radio show going. I interviewed Jack Canfield one week by renting a free conference room uh, at the downtown public library. So I interviewed Jack Canfield on my phone in the public library that week. You
it's
do what you got to do to keep it going.
and that's what I'm hearing from you, that there are, you had so many things going against you.
Mhm.
It would have been completely understandable, even acceptable and expected, that you just kind of throw your hands up and you're like, man, I'm done. I'm going to go get some public assistance. I'm going to, move in with family. I'm going to go get a job at the Burger King. Like, any of those things could have happened. Uh, and so what was it that kept you driving through all of that resistance, living in your car, popping into a Motel 6 occasionally, using the public library to get online? What kept pushing you through all of that, even though you weren't getting any real kind of positive reinforcement from the world around you?
I just knew it was a matter of time before something would hit. If I kept doing something every day to move myself forward, I knew that the path would eventually light up in front of me. It's like Moses standing before the Red Sea. The Red Sea didn't part before him until he put his foot in the water. It didn't part first. He had to take the step. He had to have the leap of faith first before that happened. I knew that there was something to all of this, and the radio show is the cornerstone of everything. It's the springboard from which everything else flows. I created my magazine as an offshoot from my radio show. I started doing ghostwriting because I used to teach English and public speaking in a 2-year business college. I figured if I can teach people how to write term papers, I can help people write their books. It was a very natural thing. And by that time, I already had one book. I have 5 now. So I knew that there was something in front of me, and it was just a matter of figuring out not just what were my skills, because I knew what my skills were. I had to figure out how I could monetize that. And that was the piece I had not figured out yet. But I knew there was an answer somehow, somewhere, some way. And I just knew that by aligning myself with the right people, it would happen eventually.
So take me to that moment where everything's been going the same and you have this belief, this firm belief in your head that things are going to turn around, things are going to get better. I know it. You're confident. Take me to that inflection point where something changed and you knew it was different.
That's really interesting. I think what happened was the last job that I had was I was making calls for a real estate agent here in town, inviting people to open houses, assessing whether people were ready to buy or sell, and setting appointments for my agent. And by this time, I had started ghostwriting books for people. I wasn't charging as much as I was now because I had to get a portfolio. I mean, I had to have proof of concept first. I knew I could do it, but the market didn't know I could do it. So I was slowly building my business while I was working part-time. And the first couple times that people decided to pay me to write their books, I figured, okay, I can do this. And it was really fun to reach the completion point with those first couple of clients because I knew that I could do it. And so as I built confidence, I was able to raise my rates. I was able to find more streams of revenue. I was aligned with the right set of people. Chris Whitehead is my coach. He helped me get to Apex last year. He and I have known each other for about a decade, and he's never ever steered me wrong. And he has stuck with me through thick and thin. He's seen me at my worst, and he's seen me at my best, and he has earned the right to be on this journey with me. He believed in me, and that's sometimes the really critical thing is if you have someone in your corner who believes in you no matter what, don't ever screw that relationship up because you might only have one or two of those in your entire life.
Yeah, well said. And so it sounds like you just kept doing the work, and then you asked somebody to pay you for the work, and they said yes, and they had a good and they didn't sue you or yell at you afterwards. And you're like, hey, maybe I can do this, and then that launches confidence, and it launches you further and further. Is that kind of how it ended up?
It is. And I think, as Tony Robbins says, the person with the most certainty wins. I just started telling the marketplace, I do this, even when I hadn't done one yet. I knew I could because I taught people how to write term papers, and I taught people how to put speeches together. So I knew I could do it. And so I just started declaring to the world, this is what I do. And finally, people started paying me, and I'm doing it.
And so for the tribe, everybody that's listening here, that's an important point, because if you take like current Brian, and then let's create like Nega Brian, and we put them next to each other, and one of them says, I help people write their books, and then the other one says, I'd like to maybe help somebody write a book someday. Which one are you going to hire?
Oh, the person with certainty, the person who's already done it, the person who boldly went forth.
Yeah, even if you haven't done it, I'm like, I'm listening to this guy. It's what he does, right? Yeah. How many have you written? 0.
Yeah,
but it'll be fine. Like, all right.
I actually did my first one for free, and that wasn't a ghostwriting job. That was a coaching job.
Okay.
And he said to me, Brian, I know you haven't done this yet. I need your help. I know you can do it. You don't have a portfolio yet. Coach me for free, and I will give you a brilliant testimonial when I'm done. And that's exactly what happened.
Nice.
And that person just joined Apex recently. So it's all coming full circle. So I coached him for free, gave him a lot of great help. He said, I could not have done this without you, which I love. And that's what happens when you have a great experience. When someone has a great experience with you, get their testimonials. And don't be afraid to show them off. In fact, on my website, briankwright.com, I have a lot of testimonials from high-level people who've been on my show. And I believe those testimonials have helped me get other high-level guests. Jack Canfield, I think, came on my show because his team saw all the testimonials. In fact, Jack said on my show, you've interviewed a bunch of my friends. And I very confidently said, yes, I have.
Yep.
There's a lot of power in that.
That's what I do. I interview successful people. That's what
I interview world-class people, and I, not a pedestal moment at all, but I walk around with the idea that I'm one of the best interviewers in the world. And I consistently get that great feedback. I have a blast being on your show with you. It's why I have 10 years worth of episodes. In fact, next week is my 10-year anniversary episode.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Doing anything for 10 years is also always a great thing, but being able to consistently put out new, fresh content that's engaging and meaningful to the world or to a specific audience is one of the hardest things to do, not because it's hard to come up with stuff to talk about, but more importantly, it's just hard to keep doing it over and over and over and being that consistent person. There was a comment one time that I heard on Entrepreneurs on Fire with John Lee Dumas. And it was one of his guests. I can't remember his name, but he gave this contrarian advice about sometimes it's about the quantity, not the quality. And it was a little counterintuitive, but he was saying, you don't have to be the best, but you just have to keep showing up. And as long as you keep showing up, then people will respect that. And then JLD obviously chimed in and he said, I agree with that because I knew for a fact that I could never be the world's best podcaster. I could never be the world's best interviewer. I'm not famous. I'm not a celebrity. But you know what I can do? I can release a podcast every single day. And I
Yeah.
have for the last
Mhm.
10 years. And people
Mhm.
notice that,
Mhm. Yeah.
that
And his
consistency.
shows are probably 20, 25 minutes. I've heard his show a bunch of times. He's really fantastic. My shows are an hour long.
Mhm.
I toyed with the idea of doing my show every day, but it's an hour long show. I do a lot of preparation. I wouldn't have time to run my business if I did that. So I decided that once a week was probably just fine.
But you do it once a week and you're always there once a week and you're very
Mhm.
consistent with it. And that's really what matters in this day and age where attention spans can be measured in seconds. The
Yes.
fact that you keep showing up, somebody sees that, somebody appreciates it, and probably people see it that you'll never meet, that you'll never hear from. But if you stopped, they'd be like, what happened to Brian's show?
Right. Yeah. And it's really cool. I discovered a few months ago that Listen Notes, which is a site that tracks listens and whatnot, but my show's in the top 1% of all podcasts in the world. I mean, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Something I can hang my hat on.
And so, this is one of your areas of expertise about creating authority.
Yeah.
Maybe give us some tips about what are some of the best ways that if I'm an unknown person in the world and I want to be known and established as an authority, what
Mhm.
are some tips that you would recommend for me to kind of start on that path?
Post content within your area of expertise every day, sometimes more than once. I've got a Facebook group, Entrepreneur Live, and in July, I had 37 people in that group. And my coach said, when you get to 100 people, you can make an offer to that group, because he's teaching me about monetizing my group. So the next week, I added 93 people to the group. And so the next week I said, Chris, I have 130 people in the group. He's like, really? I said, yeah. I invited like 120, 130 people, and 93 of them said, sure, I'll join your group. So I post to that group every single day, something that is valuable. On the weekends, it might be more of a motivational thing, but I want to post something related to writing or marketing every single day that is valuable. So I think that's really, really critical. And when someone makes a comment on your post, respond to it, even if it's thank you so much, I appreciate you. That gets the engagement going. But when you post consistently, people will start to notice you. If you are everywhere, people will start to notice you. I'm very active on Twitter, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. I do lots of podcasts, not only my own, but I love being interviewed by people. In fact, last year I was on 46. I had 46 speaking opportunities, and I did my own show 42 times last year because, my dad passed away. So I paused my show for a while. So I was out there 88 times last year. So people, and then when you post, when you are on someone else's show, that shows someone, oh, look, Brian just did this. So I think that's the other thing too, is play nice in the sandbox with people. When you're on someone else's show, post about it, promote it. I mean, I love it when my guests promote what I just did. So of course I will do the reciprocal. And when I'm on your show, I will post this all over the place and say, I was on Josh's show and this is a fantastic experience. So you just have to play nice in the sandbox with people. Don't think you're too good for school. You're not too cool for school. Just do it and promote and edify other people and showcase their brilliance. It's not always about you. It's about edifying the other person. The other person, the guest on my show, is always the star. I don't do a majority of the talking. 80 to 90% of the talking is done by my guest, because I'm pretty good at drawing them out and following up.
You said something that's really near and dear to my heart, and for those that are listening, I think this is really getting to the core of the matter. Is when you focus on giving somebody else something, then you're going to get what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this, it's almost a cliche, focus on, was it Jim Rohn or Zig Ziglar? I can't remember. I think it was Jim Rohn, about if you want to get what you want, focus on giving other people what they want.
Mm-hmm.
One of those people said that, but
Zig.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that has never been truer. And I've noticed that myself when I focus on what is the thing that this other person needs and how can I be of value to them? And if I keep stacking and stacking and basically sandbagging value bombs,
Mm-hmm.
at some point I may need to cash those in, maybe not.
Mhm.
But at some point I may need to cash those in. And when I do need to cash those in, I have all of these people that are saying, oh, Josh, yeah, of course, Josh, man, Josh is great. Josh has been so helpful to me. You guys need to do this thing.
Yeah.
Okay? And that has made such a big difference, because it becomes less important how amazing or good your thing is,
Yeah.
because it's more about that relationship that you've developed. And I think that's
Absolutely. And I'll prop you up. I am so happy and grateful that you are on my journey, because you are so helpful and so supportive, and you connect me with people, and you take action quick. And I love having people like you in my life. So thank you so much.
well, yeah, I appreciate that, man. And that's what for those of you listening, Brian and I have known each other for a few months here. We're in the same mastermind group, and Brian produces compilation books. There was a bestseller that recently came out, The Greatest Lessons I Learned from My Dad.
Mhm.
And that was a huge hit. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
And there's another book that's there. You got a picture right there for those that are only on audio. Where can you find that, by the way? Amazon?
Amazon, The Greatest Lessons I Learned from My Dad by Brian K Wright.
There you go. And so Brian is producing another one as of this recording. He's producing another book called The Greatest Lessons I Learned from My Mom. And somebody recommended that I participate in this book, because I have a great relationship with my mom. She's been super influential. And because it was Brian, and because I liked Brian, and because of all the things that Brian had done for me, on Christmas Day, I went in and I signed up for this thing. I wrote my chapter, I edited it, and I sent it to him within an hour.
Yeah.
And I did that because I wanted to make sure that Brian knew that I was in Brian's corner, because Brian is a huge value to me. And that's one of those things, like if I can contribute to somebody else's project in a meaningful way, then that strengthens and deepens our relationship. And then who knows what we're able to do in the future. But
Absolutely. And the fact that you did it so quickly on Christmas Day is something that will always stand out to me. So then when you introduced your beta version of your program, I was in. I was like, yes, I will do this. And I'm in it now. And if I see glitches, I say, Josh, this here, what do I do with this? Oh, that's something I have to fix. Thank you for bringing that up. So I'm here to help, love, and support. That's just who I am.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And so let's kind of dig into how that beautiful brain works in your skull there. And we're going to get into the do zone diagnostic. You ready?
Yes.
Awesome. So this is a series of 5 questions I ask every guest, so that we can see how your brain ticks and soak up all the knowledge that we can. So just rapid fire, first thing that comes to mind. Number 1, what is one thing you do that keeps you focused on your goals?
That's a great question. I tend to keep score. So I like keeping track of not only where the income is, but the number of people that I'm helping. So knowing the impact that I'm making keeps me going. And because I want to accomplish at least one thing every single day. And gratitude is so critical.
Keeping score. Gratitude.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And so next question, how do you get back on track when you lose that focus?
You know what's interesting? Because I collect so many testimonials from happy clients, I will go back and listen and watch to all the amazing things that someone said about me and the things that I did, because if they all think I'm amazing, then it must be true.
Well said. Another good reason to collect testimonials, just to make yourself feel better every once in a while.
And yes, I do own that. I have done that, and it has been so enormously helpful in certain moments in my life.
Nice. Next question, who is your support group and how do they keep you accountable?
Gosh, my Apex family of choice. I love them so much. I know that if I'm having a bad day, I can reach out to any of the people that I've stayed connected to, and I can get refocused. There are people that I've reached out to on the phone saying, hey, I'm not having a great day. If I have to text my coach and say, bat phone, I have to talk. Great. Let me get back to you as soon as I finish this other thing here. So having a support group is really, really critical, and knowing who your cheerleaders really are. Some people really care, but everyone else is just really curious and are prepared to use whatever you share against you when they can. So be really judicious about who your circle is. I keep my circle, my tight circle, really small on purpose.
Yeah, well said. Next question, where do you draw the line on what to do and what to delegate?
I choose to operate within my superpowers as often as possible. And if I know something is not my superpower, I better hire someone else to do it. Either I don't know how to do it, or I just don't want to, or don't have time. I hired a VA in June after joining Apex in May, specifically to help me do the things that I haven't had time to do, or the things I know I'm not good at.
Got it. And then finally, what is the number one pro tip you'd give to somebody looking to get more stuff done in less time?
More stuff done in less time. Here's what I've shared with people. You know how sometimes when you have a meeting coming up and the other person is late and you don't know how late they're going to be, have a list of things you can do in 10 or 15 minutes. So yes, there are longer term tasks. If I have something coming up, I know something's going to take me a long time to do. I'm really hesitant to start that because I don't want to stop and start and stop and start. But if you have a list, even if it's in your head, of things that you can do in 5, 10, 15 minutes, and you're waiting for someone to show up to your meeting, or you're standing in line at the post office or whatever that is, have that list. That way you're still getting stuff done and you are multiplying your time exponentially.
That's really cool. And so you kind of got your emergency productivity list where just in case I find myself with 15 extra minutes, I'm going to knock out one of these things.
Yeah. So if I'm working on my monthly magazine and I know that there's an article that I haven't read through and edited yet, I can do that in probably 15 minutes if it's pretty well written to start with.
Nice. That's really cool. I appreciate you sharing that. And so tell me a little bit about your book writing business, and what do you actually do, and who's it for?
Fantastic. I serve established entrepreneurs to help them get their message out to the world. I really love working with people who have not written a book yet because they have all the questions, and the teacher inside of me gets to come out and impart my knowledge. And they are the people who are usually the most appreciative. Not that the experienced authors aren't, because they sure are. In fact, I've worked with people who have already written their first book and they just don't have time to do their second book. So they hire me to help them do that.
So what are some of those, all the questions? What are some of the big primary questions that somebody that has never written a book before? What are the most common questions to get asked?
What do I write about? Will anyone actually read this? How do I structure it? How do I know what stories to tell?
Yeah.
How do I get started?
What if I run out of stuff to say?
What if I run out of stuff to say? Well, my job, if I'm your ghostwriter and I'm interviewing you on Zoom like we're doing, my job is to draw those things out. And if someone shares a story, and then I might ask, so what did you learn from that? Would you go through this again if you had to? What was your big lesson? What would you share with someone who hasn't gone through this yet, but might be?
So it sounds like there's an interview process. So I don't have to necessarily, if I'm your client, I don't necessarily have to just show up and like send you a manuscript or something. You're going to draw that out of me. Walk me through that process.
Right. A lot of people come to me with a blank slate.
Okay.
And so we have a session first to figure out what exactly is your message. What will your call to action be at the end? That's the piece that most people don't think about. They just think about sharing their story. Okay, yawn. Your friends and family will buy your book by default, but then what? There are literally 7 billion people in the world who do not know who you are. How will they know who you are, and why will they buy your book? So what is your call to action? If you are an entrepreneur, you want to use your book to leverage into something else. You may or may not make $1 million selling your book. I would say that most of the time you're not going to make $1 million selling only your book, but it's what you can do with your book afterwards. Are you using this to help people get into your community somehow on your mailing list? Are you selling a course? Are you selling a book? Are you selling a cash flow game, Robert Kiyosaki? Are you trying to get people to come to your free weekend event like T. Harv Eker did? How are you getting people into your world after the book is done? So we figured that piece out. That will help us hone in on the angle that we're going to take. So then we figure out what your structure might be, what your outline might look like. And then we figure out what your stories are going to be and plot which stories go into which chapters. Because I learned with some of my early clients, if some of our sessions got spaced out over the course of a couple of months because people are busy, they forget that they already told this story to me 2 other times. So as I look at the transcript, I'm like, oh, you already shared this story. Now I have to figure out which version you told better. And now I have to figure out where the story actually goes.
And so how long does a process like that typically take for somebody that shows up with a blank slate?
I tell people to allow 6 months. It could be sooner. It might be a little longer. Sometimes people will say, oh, I thought of something new. Can we hop on and have another session? Sure. That's not a problem. Or I was just on this podcast. I think this will be really great content. Okay, great. So now I get to get it transcribed and figure out how to triangulate that into what we've already talked about. So that plays a part. The other piece that also matters is once I give you a first draft, how long are you going to sit on it before you give me your feedback?
Yeah.
That can really, really impact our timeline.
Right.
So I tell people, 6 months, it could be sooner, but because I work with people who are very busy, understandably so, I might have to follow up a couple of times and say, so did you have feedback for me? Yes, I'm going to get to that this weekend. And so it might end up being a little bit longer than 6 months. Sometimes it might be less. In fact, I did my collaborative book about, the dads, the greatest lessons I learned from my dad. I had 28 contributors. Book was done start to finish in 4 months. So sometimes it can happen really fast. And that was herding 28 cats around.
Right. It's hard to herd cats, especially entrepreneur cats.
Yeah.
I get it.
Love all of them.
Right.
But yes, sometimes it can be a chore.
So
managing it.
So can you give me an example of maybe one of your clients, and maybe you don't have to give their name unless you want to, but one of your clients that kind of really struggled at the beginning, but you were able to get through this process and they were able to launch their book and they were able to create some kind of meaningful result from that. Can you just kind of give us a case study of why should an entrepreneur go through this process?
Yeah. I could point to several examples. There's one client where we finished last summer and it was his first book, and he runs e-commerce businesses and helps people start and run e-commerce businesses. So he was steering people toward getting into his coaching program. And we decided that his book was be more about, the book is called Scratch and Claw. And so that was the theme all the way through, is how he had to really, really work hard to get to where he was. And we talked about some of the character traits that successful entrepreneurs have. And so we had, I think, 30 short chapters. The book ended up being 130-ish pages long, but it was great because not only were we making points about each character quality, but we also told a story. What story illustrates that? A story or two. Stories sell. It's not just about your story. You have to have a structure that your stories will support, not the other way around. I think that's one mistake people make when they try and write their book. They're story driven, but the stories do matter, but the structure matters. If I'm reading a bunch of stories and they feel like they're meandering all over the place, as a reader, I'm going to wonder, where are we really going with this? And if I have to work too hard to figure out where you're going, I'm going to quit reading your book.
Yeah, well said. Scratch and claw. So and that's part of another question kind of worth bringing up here is if somebody needs to get their book out there, one question I would imagine or issue comes up quite a bit is, I'm not very creative.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where you're drawing on your decades of experience doing this and saying, well, hey, here's what's going to be compelling. Here's what's going to get people to read the rest of the book. Here's what's going to sell. Can you maybe just talk very briefly about that part of the strategy?
Yeah. People are more creative than they think they are. And having someone like me in your corner will be very helpful because I draw that stuff out. Sometimes people think, oh, that might not be interesting. Oh, no. Yes, it will be. We can spin it in a way that's really interesting because somebody needs you and somebody needs your message. You need to write your book because the longer you wait to write your book, the longer you are denying someone who needs you. So don't play small. Let's get your book started.
And where can somebody go to get that book started?
They can go to writeabookforyou.com, spelled out all the way out, writeabookforyou.com. You can get a description of how I help people. There are testimonials later on down the site, and there's a calendar link at the bottom. And there's also a link to my appearance on the nationally syndicated show, The List, where in 2 minutes and 15 seconds, I talk about 3 things you can do to get your book started right now.
That's awesome. writeabookforyou.com. Is that right?
Correct. I was amazed that that was available. I jumped on it.
Got it. It's all yours now, baby.
Yep.
Excellent. That's good. Brian, really appreciate you. We're going to wrap up from here. Brian K Wright was our guest today. If you are interested in learning more and getting started writing your book, you can go to writeabookforyou.com and learn more about Brian K Wright. And if you are a busy entrepreneur looking to get to the next level, head over to thedozone.com for more productivity tips, tools, and strategies. You can also join our Facebook group of the same name. Until next time, remember, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. What are you going to do with yours?